They caught the last train for the day. The music died, and they were singing. From the Chevy to the levee of the levee and now the boys drinking whiskey and wine, singing this sweet day that I died. This is the day that I died. They were singing, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove a Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. And the old boys just want to make sure the mic got you right. Singing, this will be the day that I die. This will be the
The secret of happiness lies in knowing this, that we live by the law of expenditure. We find the greatest joy not in getting, but in expressing what we are. There are tides on the ocean of life, and what comes in depends upon what goes out. The currents flow inward, only where there is an outlet. Nature does not give to those who will not spend. Her gifts are merely loaned to those who will not use them. Empty your lungs and breathe. Run, climb, work, and laugh. The more you give out, the more you shall receive. Be exhausted, and you shall be fed. We do not really live for honors or for pay. Our gladness is not in taking and holding, but in the doing, the striving, the building, the living. It is a higher joy to teach than to be taught. It is good to get justice, but better to do it. Fun to have things, more fun to make them. The happy person is the one who lives the life of love, not for the honors it may bring, but for the life itself. Well, good afternoon. I'm Reverend Dan Schatz. I'm the minister at the Unitarian Congregation of Westchester, Pennsylvania, where Francine's daughter Janine is a member. And before we start, I want to remind you all, if you haven't already, to silence your digital devices. We've gathered this afternoon to remember Francine, to mourn her death, to celebrate her life, and to say goodbye. We come to remember her in her times of strength and in her times of weakness, to remember her in her moments of joy and in her moments of sadness, to remember her as she was long ago and as she was only 2 months past, to remember her as she was, not more and not less. We come also to celebrate her life, to share stories of that life, to honor her spirit and her dignity. We come to celebrate, and we come to mourn in the silent, empty spaces once filled with her presence. We come to mourn. And we come to say goodbye. Some of you may mourn for the opportunity you didn't have to affirm your love or to resolve your differences or simply to say goodbye. So we pause to offer these final words for her today. We begin by lighting a candle of memory. Janine and Jill will light the candle in Francine's honor. In our time of grief, we light a flame of sharing, the flame of ongoing life. In this time, when we search for understanding and serenity in the face of loss, we light this candle as a sign of love and our quest for truth, meaning, and community. Take them both. So I'd like to invite you to join me in a responsive reading. You should have a copy of the reading. If anybody doesn't, you could raise your hand and someone might be able to bring it to you, or you can share. This is written by George Odell. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of defeat when with encouragement we might endure and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives are in need, and others are in need of us.
I'd like to invite Janine to come for our reading.
We actually found this that my mother had posted. Jill found it, so it was certainly something she would have wanted to have read. Dust, if you must, by Rose Milligan. Dust, if you must, but wouldn't it be better to paint a picture or write a letter, bake a cake or plant a seed? Ponder the difference between want and need. Dust, if you must, but there's not much time. With rivers to swim and mountains to climb, music to hear and books to read, friends to cherish and life to lead. Dust if you must, but the world's out there, with the sun in your eyes and the wind in your hair, a flutter of snow, a shower of rain. This day will not come round again. Dust if you must, but bear in mind, old age will come and it's not kind. And when you go, and go you must, you yourself will make more dust.
Francine Joan Bruskin Sheppard did not like sitting still. I don't mean she was fidgety. She could sit on the beach with a book all day when she was surrounded by a place and the people that she loved. But she always had to be doing something, planning something, learning something, reading something, teaching something. The only thing she couldn't do, as one of her friends put it, was be bored. Francine can't be bored. So for 81 years, Francine made things happen. She was always this way from the time she was a child. The oldest of three growing up in a working-class neighborhood of Philadelphia, it was not an easy upbringing. Her mother struggled with mental illness. And her father worked all day and didn't really know what to do with children. So the duties of the household sometimes fell to Francine. She did what was needed, but she also knew that if she were to find a life outside the home, it would have to be one that she made for herself. And for all that home life was challenging and in some ways austere, imagine being a 15-year-old girl sharing a room with your 5-year-old sister. She made her own path at a very young age. She found joy dancing on American bandstands, or getting on the subway at Philadelphia's 69th Street station to explore the city, or heading to New Jersey's Ocean City, or just being with friends. And once Francine made friends with you, she stayed friends. Some of the people who meant so much to her in high school, I believe, are here today. She never lost touch. Francine's family valued learning, and Francine made college a priority. It wasn't easy. She became pregnant with Janine shortly after graduating from high school and married her first husband, Mark, not long after. Some people told her, well, you're a mother now. And she was. And she was good at that. But she was never just a mother. She worked her way through college while she was pregnant and while she was a new mom. Her sister Denise would watch the baby while Francine worked in the day or went to school at night. And in 1966, Francine graduated from Temple University with a degree in elementary education and continued to a master's in French while she taught in the public schools. When Francine and Mark moved to Cleveland with Janine and Jill, she continued teaching and, being herself, quickly reached beyond her work and home. She joined the Humanist Ethical Society, became involved with the Women's Center of Cleveland, and perhaps following her brother Gene's example, began to take up a number of social justice causes. Still, something wasn't quite right in Cleveland. Neither Francine or Mark liked the weather, and Mark's job kept him traveling. And Francine realized that while she loved languages, she did not love teaching middle school. She could never suffer fools easily. Middle school kids can be obnoxious. And before long, she once again began to make a different path. She certainly would not sit still in a place or in a career that was anything less than fulfilling. So they moved here, to Columbia. And Francine began studying at the University of Maryland in Baltimore for her second master's, this time in social work. And in some ways, those first years in Columbia were challenging. She and Mark came here with no jobs, no income, 2 kids. Their marriage was a good partnership, but in other ways, less than either of them needed it to be. But at the same time, she had found her calling for life in social work, and she had found her home for life here in Columbia. So as she always did, Francine made things happen. She helped to start the Ethical Society here. And although her upbringing was entirely secular, she also found a Jewish community to connect with so that she could honor that part of her heritage. She was never religious, but being Jewish was a basic part of who she was, and she always celebrated Hanukkah with the kids and kept the mezuzah at her door. After she graduated, she became the director of the Rape Crisis Center here, and then worked at Johns Hopkins, Jewish Family Services, and finally the Visiting Nurse Association. At the same time, she became deeply immersed in community and social justice organizations. And most importantly, in whatever she did, Francine made friends for life, so many of whom are here today, so many more who could not be here. She never let her friendships fade and was often the organizer of whatever activity they would do together, whether it was a monthly lunch or a global exchange trip. She could remember the last time she saw every one of her friends, and even in her last years, as her memory began to fail, she made sure to keep up with the people she loved for as long as she could. After the divorce, Francine picked up extra work at JK's pub. She needed the money. After all, she couldn't sit still. Honestly, she wasn't a very good waitress, especially for a pub, because she didn't drink. So she didn't really know what she was doing, and she was always a little suspicious of the patrons who, after all, she only saw when they were drinking. But one of the regulars, who was a social work professor, began to notice her and asked her out. She told him no thank you, but he asked her again and again, and for once somebody else made things happen for her because she and Don were married in 1986. They had a wonderful time together. The annual weeks in Ocean City, trips across the world to dozens of countries, and they kept just as busy when they were at home, serving as ushers at 3 different playhouses in the area, which gave them free tickets to all the best shows. As she grew older, Francine found new roles. She began teaching adult students at Notre Dame College, women making their own ways just as Francine had so many years before. They reminded her of herself. And to some, she became a lifelong mentor. She became active with the Howard County Friends of Latin America, traveling to Guatemala multiple times, always coming away with a richer community of people in her life. Beginning in 1990, she found a new role as Bubby, grandmother to her children and stepchildren, and Aunt Fran to her nieces and nephews. Francine was as committed to her grandchildren as to anything else in her life. She made the drive to Pennsylvania every month, telling Janine she would stop when the kids started saying, "Oh God, Bubby's coming again." Not one of them ever said it. She liked to get down on the floor with them so she could play with the children. She was there at the kids' birthday parties when they were little, and Jill's kids' games when they were older, even though she didn't really follow sports. But she wanted to be able to talk with the kids about what they were interested in. She took them out to the restaurants they wanted to go to. Went traveling with some of them, and she remained committed to all of them, her children, Don's children, all the grandchildren, supporting them through childhood and into adulthood. When Don died, as devastated as she was, she wouldn't sit still. She kept traveling, inviting one friend or another to come with her on a trip. She kept creating circles of friendship and community around her because that was who she was. And when she committed herself to you, whether she knew you or not, she took it seriously. It was true whether she was a bubby, an aunt, a friend, stepmother, professor, social worker, or even a kind stranger. When Jill helped her sell her condo a few years ago, there were multiple offers at the same price, but one of them involved more challenging financing, and the realtor recommended against that one. The buyer was a single father looking for a better place to live for himself and his children. There was never any question. Francine not only sold the condo to him, but also made absolutely sure to put in a new carpet and fix the dishwasher so this father and kids she had never met could have a good home. Alzheimer's is a difficult disease, especially for someone as self-motivated, social, and intelligent as Francine was. She knew she had it and resented it. "I had all this schooling," she said, "and still my brain isn't functioning right." And she hated sitting still almost as much as she hated losing her independence. "I don't know what to do next," she would say. But even then, she knew herself well enough to make things happen. Dropping her weekly Motown dancing on Zoom, yes, she did that, in favor of movie nights in her community because she thought it would be better for her to interact with people in person. She would greet caregivers from Africa in fluent French and have wonderful conversations with them. She kept up with her book club by taking notes as she read, and Jill made sure she had a copy of the book with her so she could participate fully in the discussions. And for her 80th birthday, Francine went to Paris with her family one last beautiful time. She never sat still. She always found something to do, someone to connect with, someone to care for, something to learn. She never stopped making things happen. And for the people she loved the most, and whose lives she helped to shape, she will always make things happen, not only in memories and in stories shared, but most of all in the part of Francine that lives in everyone she touched. One of the best ways to remind ourselves of that part of Francine that lives in us is to tell the stories. And there are many good stories about Francine. So I'd like to invite a couple of family members first to come forward and share their memories, and I believe one of those memories is in the form of a poem. And after that, we'll have a time for open sharing. Jean, would you like to come up?
Sure. That was beautiful. Thank you, everybody. It's so great to see all of you. And I think I probably met most of you at some point or another, but to be honest with you, she had so many friends I couldn't always remember who they were, but I knew how important they were to her, and that's why you're here. I'm her younger brother, and this is called A Poem for My Sister. Fred, oh man, you're gone. That isn't fair. You were always there. I met you when I was 3 days old, remember? Each with our brown hair that never got gray. Niecy's that way too. Thank you, Dad. There you were, there to stay. You never went away, except when you were on the go everywhere, girl, traveling the planet, often to prance around France, but you always came back to lure us to the beloved Ocean City beach, where you kept the water out of your reach. We grew up in the same crazy house. Mom yelling, Dad snoring in the big chair. Not much room for privacy. Somehow avoiding sibling rivalry, a Jewish family where synagogues were verboten. Dad, a TV repair guy, but our TV was always broken. Trips to Broadway musicals, but we couldn't play a note. And a curse on our government, but our house, we didn't vote. We were always escaping anywhere, out, trying to hold on to our sanity as plain-speaking people, not much vanity. You were a Philly bandstander, jitterbugger, shave-vu roller skater, girlfriend of the star quarterback. Later in life, we spent endless laughs recounting the past. Lovingly. You modeled living a good life. Sister, mother, daughter, grandma, matriarch, wife, declaring a woman could have a dirty house and lead a good life. Always up for a good cause. A social worker for the world. Teacher, reader, advocate. Hey, Jean, came the frequent calls. When will I see you next? Any demos in DC this weekend? Cuba? Central America? Iraq? Gun control? Women's rights? Marching in the day? Going to meetings at night? What part of the world needs my caring? And of course, always a good movie, groovy. How about more plays than a calculator could calc? Somehow ushering in more live theater than Shakespeare himself could even dream of. You were a gem who didn't try to be perfect, but perfected the art of friendship, leaving a trail of friends that never ends. And so, Fran, you will live on with us, all of us. Who knows the number? We'll say, hey, remember when we went there with Fran? Remember Fran did this? Remember? I'll see you next time,
Maria?
technology works. All right, hi everyone. My name is Maria. I am Francine's granddaughter. So guys might have heard of me being referred to as like the long lost granddaughter. So I'm gonna tell you kind of how that happened. My mother was never the most responsible person. And whenever people realized that she was irresponsible, she would flee, she would run away. And some of the people she ran away from were her family. My understanding is that over the years she ran away a few times. The last time she ran away, I was roughly 8 years old, so I didn't really grow up in terms of teenage years with this part of my family. It wasn't until I was around 18 that I reconnected with Francine and her husband, Don, who I lovingly refer to as Pop-Pop, and we referred to Francine as Frenchie, because we could not say Francine, we were too small, and I don't think she minded too much because she loved France. So before we reconnected, my mother moved us all over the place. We lived in Mexico, we lived in 4 different states, including a short time here in Columbia, Maryland, and until we finally settled in New Mexico. Francine and Don had looked for us over the years, but we never really settled anywhere long enough for them to find us. That was until my brother took a Spanish class where he had an opportunity to get extra credit. And to get extra credit, he had to make a dish that the entire class could share. And so what does an 8th grader make for a class of 22 people but a huge burrito? One big enough that if you walk to school with it like this, wrapped in a t-shirt, people might be scared. So his middle school went on lockdown. It was national news. Actually, if you Google Burrito Boy, Clovis, New Mexico right now, you can see many articles about this instance. He was even on the Jimmy Kimmel show. It was crazy. I don't know if that's on the internet though. I've tried looking for it. Can't find it. There's this national news, and so there's finally a digital print that we exist and that we are in place. And I want to say it was Janine, who was like, well, let's Google one more time. Let's try to find them one more time. And then all these articles come up about a burrito boy in Clovis, New Mexico with my brother's name. So Francine and Don, they call the schools, they try to figure out if it's really us, who could it be? And what they found is that, I existed, Maria Morrissey, at the high school, and I was only a couple months away from being 18. So the school said, hey, we can't say anything until she's an adult, but it's only a couple of months away, if you're willing to wait. And wait, they did. So at this point, I lived on my own since I was 16, so roughly 2 years. I was estranged from my mother, alienated from my siblings, and I had resigned to really live my life without family and just choosing my family, right? Like we all have friends that we consider family, but not anything beyond that. And once I had made that decision, I get a call from the school, who I hated, because who likes high school, right? And they say, your grandparents called. I'm like, I don't have grandparents. Who are you talking about? And they said, well, they call themselves Pop-Pop and Frenchie. And so I knew exactly who they were. And so I had this unfamiliar number in my hand that I could call and maybe have, this connection to people who I hadn't seen in about a decade. So I made that call, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. And just a few short years after reconnecting with them, Don died. So Francine didn't really have to keep me in her life, right? Like, Don adopted my mom with his first wife, so she didn't even make a connection with Francine. I was just this young kid alone, and she didn't let me stay that way. So she became a constant for me in my life. I lost my place. She's also, hilariously honest. It's one of my favorite things about her. And she gave me endless support as I navigated my 20s and into my 30s, if you can believe it. She always would be amazed at every big leap that I took in my life. One of the last ones being that I drove across the country to go to law school. And she was always so proud, and she made me feel like I could do anything and conquer anything because of how proud she was of me. And she gave me this entire life and family that I would not have had otherwise. She gave me 2 very smart and successful aunts who I hope to continue to emulate as I get older. She gave me, let me mention, luckily they married really 2 cool dudes that I've got to bond with over movies, cooking, and whiskey. And she also gave me a bunch of incredible cousins who I've been able to celebrate their accomplishments with, their successes, their marriages, and also watch them grow to be really incredible adults. She gave me wonderful great aunts and uncles who seem to have endless stories, some good, some bad, and endless, wisdom as well. So while she might be known to many of you as a friend, a social worker, a world traveler, a lover of theater, she is the greatest gift that I could have ever received. And I used to not have a place to go for the holidays, and now I do because of her. So I will miss her with boundless measure, and I hope that my memorial service is a half as good as this one. So thank you.
Deep breath. I know that many of you also have stories about Francine, and if you have a brief story that you'd like to share with this community, a brief memory, I invite you to raise your hand, and we'll bring you a microphone. Please stand as you're able and say your name and share your brief story or memory.
My name is Lynn Yellett, and I knew Francine from the 1980s. I'm wearing this t-shirt. I don't think she'd mind if I wore this t-shirt here. I was one of the people in the Howard County Friends of, started out Central America. There's some others of us here, maybe they want to raise their hands. And she was the secretary of the group for years and years and years, and she was, everything we've heard about her today, we saw in that group. And the one thing that really stands out in my mind is when the group was having some issues in terms of direction, people getting along with one another, and she suggested that we all do Myers-Briggs. And you know what? It really worked. And I've kept that with me for the rest of my life. And now I look at things in terms of people's styles instead of, I can't stand them. So, it's wonderful hearing all the stories about her. And she was just she was wonderful, and she'll live in all of our hearts forever. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Nord, and right now I live in California, and I wouldn't have missed this for anything. I met Francine in 1971. She had at least one young child at that point, but I met her at an Ethical Society meeting in Cleveland, And she always remarked afterwards that she was really astounded because I let my infant crawling around daughter crawl around on a blanket on the floor. And she thought that was pretty cool. Not too long after, I mean, we did ethical society things together, and she eventually moved down here to Columbia, and I moved to Reston, Virginia. And we saw each other, you know, from time to time over the years, and talked endlessly, and had good times together. We went to France 2 times. Once for our birthdays, which was a couple of days apart in the December 8th and 10th, and it was miserably cold. And some of us were prepared for it and some of us weren't. I learned a lot from her. One of the things that I learned was do not criticize your children's boyfriends. Which I thought was really great advice because I know my own daughter brought home some very strange young men at the time, but I never said a word. She was always very interested in this Myers-Briggs and this type things, and I remember one time her saying that she did a workshop where the people divided into 2 groups. One group was the introverts and one group was the extroverts, and they planned a birthday party. And the introverts planned a very small, intimate party, not a big deal, and the extroverts invited all their 100 best friends. So I want to say that whether or not she's looking down on us, we're here, your 100 best friends, at least, maybe more, are thinking about you. So it's been a great run, and I have very wonderful memories of her.
Hi, I'm Sandy Gouldsby, and I met Francine in 1976. I had recently separated, and I saw an ad in the flyer that said I'd moved to Columbia, being separated with my 2 children, little ones. And I saw an ad in the flyer that said, if you're recently separated, come to the Ethical Fellowship and get some pointers. I think that's what it said or something. So I said, that's for me. And I didn't know a thing about the Ethical Fellowship. Well, I walk in that Sunday. My kids, I guess, were with my ex-husband. And immediately I met Francine and Mark. And within maybe 3 weeks, I was sort of a member thanks to her and Steve Boyan. And in another couple of weeks, I had been commandeered into helping with the Sunday school. And so it became quite a part of my life for a long time. When she separated, our story was that we said we had sort of magic stars because neither one of us had much money. And every now and then I would run out of money completely before my next paycheck, and I would call her and I would say, you got any money? And she would say, yeah, I got a little bit. How much do you need? And I would say, how about $150? So I'd go get $150 and pay her back. Then she might call me and say, you know, I don't have a penny and it's not paycheck for whatever. And so I had money and I would lend her money, and after a while we said, the stars are aligned for us because when I need money, you always have a little extra, and when you need it, I have a little extra. And so that's what we did for a long time. And then one time, my ex-husband's then current girlfriend came to my house while I was at work, and my babysitter in the afternoon called, and she was beside herself, and she said, this woman came in and she went upstairs, she pushed by me and she took the kids' clothes and left with the clothes. So I was apoplexic. And who did I call? Francine, because she was a problem solver and she was very strident. So I went through the whole story and she said, you gotta go get the clothes. And I said, I can't go out there with the two of them and get the clothes. She said, I'll go with you. So we drove out, I went into the house and I got the clothes. So then for years when we had a problem that we shared with one another, we would say, oh, just go get the clothes. That was our code for problem solving. And then fast forward, and when she married Don, Don was in a men's group. It's a small town in Columbia, in a men's group with the man I was dating. So we started doing couples things together in addition to being such good friends. And then fast forward to about, I don't know, Jill, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and she called me up one day. She knows about my older son, and she called me up one day and she said, Jill's helping me buy a new car. Does Chris still need a car? And I said, oh, yes, he does. I'll buy the car from you, the old car. She said, well, I think it's not going to be worth very much. I want to give him the car. So she did. He's still driving that car. And I just want to say that we played together, we loved each other, we supported each other, and that's what friends are. I love you, Francine.
No. I just wanted to share a story that fit into the category that the leader talked about, that she was kind and caring to people who were strangers. This was the farthest out story, and it also became, maybe this was Francine's style, but it just became something that we referred to many times over the years. I'm heard on the radio, I think, that there had been a murder at the 7-Eleven right near where Francine lived, and I called her to tell her about it. It sounded like the area was secured down and so on. And she said, what? There was a murder there? I was there this morning. So I said, you were? What happened? She said, well, I went in and it was very quiet and there was nobody at the counter. The murder had taken place, by the way, in the storage room in the back. So she said she was waiting and she was saying, hello, want to buy something? And this guy came out, she describes, and he was very distracted. But he rang her up. And so we put together that this was actually the murderer who was waiting for her at the store. But she had no idea that what had gone on. So I said, but what did you say to him? And she said, well, I said, it looks like you're having a rough day. So that went to our category of the conflict for us was just that Francine was always the social situation. She used her social work skills to reach out to somebody in need.
I did say there would be a lot of good stories about that. Some more good stories.
Hello, my name is Norma Byers, and I am here to speak on behalf of Leslie Salgado, who is the chair of Friends of Latin America, but she could not be here. Says, dear friends, I'm sorry and heartbroken that I cannot attend the celebration of Francine's life. I'm undergoing chemotherapy and my health does not allow me to be there with you. Francine was a core member of Friends of Latin America and our longest serving secretary. She was also a personal friend and we did a lot of things together. I'll always remember her response to my question of, how are you doing? She would say happily, I'm just fine, dear. Francine and her husband Don and I traveled to my home country of Ecuador twice. Don fell in love with my mother because of the way my mother would treat him, and with a lovely little city called Cuenca, where he wanted to retire. But unfortunately, he retired. And fortunately, he passed away before retirement. In 2000, Francine traveled with me and other members of Friends of Latin America to Cuba. And she was always there for our organization, which was founded in 1986, and she joined in 1990. I met her at my sister's house. She was there helping a Venezuelan woman who was staying with my sister to learn English. I thought, well, this woman who speaks fluent Spanish and is trying to help an immigrant from South America would surely be interested in Friends of Latin America. So I told her about our organization, and she immediately wanted to join. A few years later, she became our secretary and served as our secretary for 20 years or more. Our organization's an all-volunteer grassroots organization, and Francine contributed at almost every event, including marches, caravans, and all other action activities that we had. We are going to miss her dearly. She was always a happy, enthusiastic, wonderful, smart woman with lots and lots of energy. In her later years, I remember Francine going with us to some events of solidarity with Latin America, and Francine would always want to volunteer to help. This particular time, she volunteered to drive on a night that was rainy and pretty bad. And there were 4 of us in the car. Ray Donaldson was riding in the front seat, and we didn't realize that Francine's driving skills had gone downhill somewhat to the point that Ray put his feet up on the dashboard because he was so scared. But nothing would faze Francine. She was as happy as lucky as ever. She was a dear friend and a wonderful core member of our organization. I loved her very, very much. And I'm happy that she was my friend and compañera for so many years. Rest in peace, dear amiga.
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Krug, and I know her as Fran. I've known her since 7th grade, 1954, when she was Fran. I never could get used to calling her Francine, so I hope you'll excuse me if I refer to her as Fran today. Seated to my left is my wife, Patricia, who first met Fran at the bus stop going to school at the beginning of 7th grade in Upper Darby Junior High School. So I've jotted down a few things that I wanted to share with you. I've never met anybody like Francine Sheppard, and I don't think I ever will. The Fran I knew was filled with energy, curiosity, and concern for other people. She treasured her friendships and managed somehow to overlook the rough edges that each of us has. She had strong opinions about all sorts of things, an understatement if ever there was one. But she still cared deeply about the people she disagreed with. She understood that much of life is irrational, but in spite of that, she found a way to have fun and to enjoy herself. Fran was devoted to her daughters and grandchildren. She made a point of being present in their lives, even though that meant a lot of traveling from her home in Colombia for weekend visits. She took her grandchildren to Paris, France to celebrate their academic achievements and to share with them her love for the City of Lights. Fran loved music from the 1950s and 1960s and wasn't shy about singing along whenever the Golden Oldies station was on the radio. Somehow she always made things a little brighter for everyone she met. Fran found her soulmate in her husband, Don Carroll. Don also was an extraordinary person. He brought understanding and patience to their relationship. He appreciated Fran's unique personality and shared her sense of humor. Together they traveled to many countries where they lived for a time with host families or stayed in unpretentious places that helped them understand what life was like for ordinary people. With Don's death a few years ago, Fran suffered a loss that she never really overcame. I first met Fran in 7th grade at Upper Darby Junior High School. I don't think that we were in any classes together, but Fran was everywhere else. She was the self-appointed editor of the unofficial gossip sheet, a position that helped her find out, quote, what was going on, close quote, among the different social groups in our school. In our junior high school, if you liked someone, which is about as committed as anybody would be in those days, if you liked someone of the opposite sex, you could tell Fran who you liked, and she would quickly find out if that person also liked you. In those days, this was an essential service. We remained friends throughout high school and after, when we spent hours at the Springfield Howard Johnsons discussing the meaning of life over apple pie a la mode. We shared our secrets and our worries about the future. In more recent years, we met each year in Ocean City during summer vacations to catch up on what was happening with each of us. For Fran, Ocean City, New Jersey was close to being a sacred place. Fran's loss is a loss to all of us. Her loss isn't easy to accept, but having known her and having shared part of my life with her is something for which I will always be grateful.
We'll have more time for sharing memories and story. Oh, there's one more. I knew there'd be one more. A couple more. We had probably time for a couple more. Go ahead.
I'm Joe Meyer, and everything in my head is a little jumbled right now because I first knew Don back in either 69 or 70 when he first moved here. And then all of the things that we did with Don and Francine, like we must have gone to Everyman together for about 30 years. And when Don died, we continued to go with Francine. That was wonderful. And somehow or other, don't remember why or that it happened, I recall going to a march on Washington with Francine. I think it was Equal Rights Amendment. It didn't pass, but it was another kind of occasion that we shared with one another. And of course, one time, Francine was funny. She didn't want me to go visit Donald, who was in the cancer treatment unit down at University Hospital. But Francine went off to Ocean City. Now, Ocean City for Francine meant Ocean City, New Jersey. I've never been there. I know the other Ocean City. And, but I went down and I saw Donald anyway, with or without Francine's permission. I'm glad that I did. But I felt I had to sneak away to do that. She was very protective of Donald. She talked a lot about the book club. We had, seems like it was just a few months ago that we had there's a Japanese steakhouse that we went to with Francine, and I don't know, it all gets jumbled up, but she's a wonderful person. Gosh, we talked politics, and the connection that Francine had, I don't know what, I guess granddaughter, I don't know, with Maria was so meaningful to Francine and to me. And Maria, you are our link. And that is really, really, really important. That's why things like this memorial, or whatever we call these things, really are important, because it's a way in which we connect together. And isn't it funny? I mean, Francine would pop around in her little car. She'd meet us here and there. I don't know how she did it, but she did a lot. And I'll tell you another funny story. So Francine occasionally, I think, would go to high school reunions. Don would go with her. So there would be these name tags on a table about people who had graduated, I guess when Francine's high school class. Don would pick up somebody's name tag and pretend he was that person. We had a lovely time, but Francine accepted Don's quirks. He had a lot of quirks. But Francine, he just trusted her, loved her, and she did a lot of wonderful planning, was just a decent person with the right kinds of values. And that's what makes a difference. So anyway, thank you.
I think there's one more story in the back and then we'll move on. A thought? It's understood. Well, I know there are more stories, and there will be time after the service for sharing those stories and for being with each other. There is plenty of food, so please stay and enjoy that food, enjoy being with each other, and keep telling stories about Francine. And now I'd like to invite you into a place of meditation or prayer or whatever is most comfortable for you, beginning with a few moments of silent remembering. Francine, thank you for so many gifts. Thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your laughter. Thank you for the tears that reminded us how much you loved. Thank you for lifting yourself into the life you created and for the gift it was to your brother and sister and children and stepchildren and nieces and nephews and grandkids and so many friends. Thank you for evenings spent dancing and days spent working for the needs of other people. Thank you for clients served and students taught, for diapers changed and bills paid. Thank you for the work of justice, and for the way you had of making the vastness of this world a little smaller and closer. As you reached out to so many, so we reach out to each other in care and in comfort, especially to Jean and Evie, Denise and Horace, Janine and Darren, Jill and Scott, and to all your stepchildren and grandchildren and nieces and nephews who miss you so much already. As we remember you, we hold on to that part of you that lives in each of us, growing inside us, teaching us, helping us to shape us. It is a gift for which we will always be grateful as we in turn pass to others the goodness and the life that you kindled. Francine, thank you. Your life was a blessing, and all of us are blessed in your memory. So may it be. Although we extinguish this flame, the light that Francine brought to our lives remains with the warmth of our love and the fire of our living. These we carry in our hearts, now and forever. And we close with words from Nancy Wood. Hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth. Hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. Hold on to what you must do, even if it is a long way from here. Hold on to my hand, even when I have gone away from you. Now may Francine's memory go with you and help to sustain you in all your comings and your goings. Rest in peace.
So please join us in the song.
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plan saying they put an end to you. Walked out this morning and I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. Won't you look down upon me, Jesus? You gotta help me make a stand. Just got to see me through another day. My body's aching and my time is at hand. I won't make it any other way. Oh, I've seen fire, I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again. And I'm walking my mind to an easy time, my back turned towards the sun. Lord knows when the cold wind blows, it'll turn your head around. Well, there's hours of time on the telephone line to talk about things that come. Sweet dreams and flying machines in pieces on the ground. Oh, I've seen fire, I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you, baby, one more time again. Thought I'd see